I'm going to read, but I will be animated. First of all, thank you all for being here, and thank you, Natasha, for creating this exhibition and selecting my work to be part of it. I'm very happy to participate in this show since I'm both a practicing architect and an artist, and the crossover between art and architecture has always been a preoccupation of mine, and that is reflected in my work and also inherent in the way I think about the creative process. So for me, to practice architecture poetically is to give it artistic value grounded in culture, to give it a reason for being other than pure function and aesthetics. It's a kind of questioning is required that involves a constant interpretation of the world we live in. Art and architecture are manifestations of transitions of ideas into formal speech. Dynamic art and architecture have the power to ignite the imagination, to arouse curiosity, to engage the body, to demand its user to participate. It goes beyond what is visible, transcending the retinal experience as seen in the work of Marcel Duchamp, by focusing our understanding on phenomena in the world through bodily experience and tactile perception. That is, it involves all of our senses, including memory and gut feelings, rather than just what we see. Perception then is not merely passes before sensory stimulation, but as phenomenologist Merleau-Ponty suggests, is a creative receptivity. Today there are two works that I will talk about, and that will focus mainly on process, and address my concerns about the creative act in making. The first is the Utopia series, seen here on the wall, and that will be presented on the screen. The second is the Fig Vessel project, which is the sculpture standing there, which was my final project for my recent master's in the History Theory of Architecture program at McGill University. In both cases, process is very critical to the understanding of the work. So is the connection between the theoretical aspect, the creative impulse, and the made work. So, Utopia is a series of ceramic monoprinted tiles that explores a critical interpretation of stonework patterns at the Acropolis in Athens, Greece, through our perception of woven grain in urban and natural landscapes. It is a built world of perspectival views from above or underwater that blurs scale, weaving together time and space through the illusionary depth of surface. Inspired by the weavings of Bauhaus artist Annie Albers and the path that millions of people took to visit an important ancient artifact, these four pieces are entitled Of Warp and Weft 1 and 2, Utopia, and Liminality. So warp and weft are the two directions that are called in traditional loom weaving. One is in this direction, the other one is in this direction. And I named these two pieces to place emphasis on the diagonal force created by the superposition of these two, hence perspective. So Utopia refers to a perfect place. So this one is, this is Warp and Weft 1. So as I was talking about the two directions and the emphasis on the diagonal that create a force perspective. This is Warp and Weft 2, which attempts to explore similar things with different grain patterns. This is Utopia, which you can hardly see. So Utopia refers to a perfect place. As it is barely visible, as if seen through a body of water, we can hardly decipher its imperfections, thus claiming it as ideal, yet an ideal that is unattainable. The last one, Liminality, unites the other works, referring to the space in between land and sea. It is reduced to such a minimal expression that all dimension is lost, all perspective is gone, and one is brought back to the fundamental position we experience in the world, through a simple horizontal datum line which all is measured. But the questioning of perspective and surface, three-dimensional and two-dimensional, goes beyond formal and literal expressions. It really comes from the trust in the process. These works were created through steps that demanded a surrendering to the unknown, giving up the ideal artistic thought, and discovering the beauty and the complexity to build things in reverse. So first, a plaster slab, I'm going to describe the process. So first, a plaster slab is built, and it acts as a kind of canvas on which to paint. So multiple layers of underglazes are applied with the knowledge that the first painted layer will be what one sees as the top layer of the finished work. So everything is painted in reverse, because it's painted onto the plaster. Thus, what you see when you draw or you paint, parts become hidden as you pile them on, and it's actually the building of an image in reverse order. So the last layer you will see is the one that's least visible on the finished surface. So here the colors are not applied to the ceramics, but to a support, which is the plaster. When seeing an image in perspective, like a photograph, we can understand, even though some parts appear larger than others and some parts are hidden, we understand which elements are actually in front of the other. Here, it's not so obvious. So once the underglazes are all applied to the plaster slab, you build up side walls around the plaster slab, into which a liquid porcelain clay body is poured. And this is also known as slip casting. So after a few hours, when it's dried to a point where it has enough structure that it can be peeled off the plaster slab, it's ready to be put in the kiln. Another false representation occurs in color, because all of the underglazes are made up of chemicals that have different color at room temperature. And when they react to heat in the kiln, they change into other colors. So those that we experience after the firing or in the final work. When the piece comes out of the first firing, layers of glazes can be applied directly to the surface of the ceramic tile, which now would become the order in which it's painted. In my case, I painted everything onto the plaster slab, so of course the glazes, you can't really see the color that comes out, so it's really, you have to really trust in what you're going to get once it comes out of the kiln. The only thing that I painted at the very last went onto the actual ceramic when it came out of the first firing was the clear glaze. And then it was refired, and that was the final work. So that was the first series. And the second project I wanted to talk about is my fig vessel project. Bring that over. And this was the project that I did for my master's. So I'm going to talk a little bit about it, and then I'm going to show you a video of how it works. So the house for a fig, okay, is a response to a mandate to build a portable instrument such as a container or a utensil that looks at the way we experience the ritual of eating in the city of Montreal, and was intended to be part of a group picnic. The inspiration for my project comes from the actual food to be eaten. I chose the fig for its exotic nature to Montreal, for its rich symbolic characteristics and its natural phenomena. The fig embodies the wonder and phenomena of metamorphosis in nature. It's a receptacle, an involuted flower that encompasses an entire life cycle, the origin of its genesis. So the seed, the flower, and ultimately the flute are all contained in one thing, and all states are present at once. And the transformation happens in this concealed container, which must be opened to reveal the mystery or the genius of its origin. The fig evolves from a symbiotic relationship of the coevolution between one species of fig tree and another species of fig tree, and between the insect and the fruit. So there's two kinds of genesis occurring simultaneously. One is bearing eggs and the other is bearing fruit. And the way that it works is that there's a female wasp that enters through the hole and deposits her egg in the short-style flowers for a new generation of wasps. Then she collects pollen and flies to the other kind of fig tree and enters through the other hole in the fig to be, often losing its wings in the process, and pollinates it so that we actually get the edible fruit. And this cycle has to keep happening in order for us to actually have figs to eat. So it was fascinating to me that this phenomena exists, and both the idea of metamorphosis and symbiosis are existing in nature. And I was trying to get to that root of that in my project. And the fig also unites the male and female sexes from the distinct tree species by the way of the traveling wasp. It is both the fruit of fertility and the womb itself. So I have designed this vessel as receptacle for genesis and metamorphosis. So here's some images, a little bit fuzzy, of the fig wasp as it's entering inside the hole. And this is a diagram of how my thing works. So it conceptually and physically explores the symbiotic relationships and metamorphic states through a portable vessel made of transformable molds. Get back to the drawing. So basically, this part was hand-built, and the other parts were built out of molds. And the molds that were used were transformable molds. And so this sculptural work, sorry, I'm just going to move a bit back and forth between images and text, was kind of like a mini architectural project. It was complete with research of fabrication.